Welcome back to the Inside Nebraska Recruiting Blitz podcast. I'm Tim Verghese, as always. Another shorter episode this week. I know I said that last week and then I talked for 25 minutes, but I promise this one's going to be shorter, sticking to 15, 20 minutes. Just going to hit on where we were last week, just some important developments with who we saw last week, because we were out at Lee Summit North to go see four-star wide receiver commit Isaiah Mozee and three-star defensive line target Kamori Moore, who decommitted from Oklahoma just last week prior to our visit down. To Lee Summit North. So going to touch on those guys, just the latest in that recruitment. Touch on some other recruiting notes we kind of had coming out of the weekend and out of this past week. Touch on the 2027 quarterback cycle, just because with Nebraska getting Dayton Raiola committed in 2026. I think, obviously they're going to potentially look for a second 2026 quarterback, but I think it's important we also kind of turn the page a little bit and spotlight just who Nebraska's looking at in 2027, because that's going to be the first QB cycle Nebraska's recruiting post Dylan Raiola. And that's the first, like, okay, that's an important class for Nebraska. Is the best way to put that. We're also going to touch on just some early visitors we know are going to be in town for Rutgers versus Nebraska. That list is still coming together. A lot of fluid names, I guess, is the best way to put it too. Just some names that we're just not sure right now whether they're going to officially make it in or not. But we do know a couple names for sure making it in. We'll touch on those. Touch on a couple guys that could potentially be in town. And yeah, keep it short and sweet this week. So we'll start here. We'll start with the weekend where we were at on Friday. We went to with Nebraska on the road. Me and Jansen Coburn went out to Lee Summit North to go see Isaiah Mozee. The initial plan was just to go see Mozee and some of the young talent over at Lee Summit North, as they've always got talent in the talent up and coming. But then the week of that visit, pretty much on Wednesday, Kamori Moore, their three-star defensive lineman, backed off his long-term pledge to Oklahoma. Moore committed to Oklahoma back in the summer of 2023. Nebraska was actually the runner-up there and finished just short. Iowa State finished up just short as well to Oklahoma. Since he's decommitted, we caught up with him just to see kind of where he's at with this process, what's the latest there. He's going to take his time with this process this time around. You could see a decision come even in December. There's a chance he shuts things down sooner rather than later. But also, I think right at this point, he might want to take his time with it, just with the amount of schools that are kind of reaching back out to him, and as he tries to figure out his own situation. Nebraska's up there. Nebraska pretty much immediately engaged post decommitment. Nebraska's kind of been engaged for a good bit there, just back channeling. It helps Jamar Mosey, Nebraska senior assistant, who's pretty much taking an on-field recruiting role and an off-campus recruiting role. He is obviously the father of Isaiah Mozee and was the head coach over at Lee Summit North for close to a decade prior to leaving for UCF earlier this spring, and then obviously came from UCF to Nebraska over the summer. Mosee's maintained contact with Moore, his former player, over the last few months. Obviously, he's maintained contact with his son as well, of course. But Keith Williams, Nebraska's director of player personnel, has also been engaging with Moore. We could see Nebraska's coaching staff, Terrence Knighton and Tony White, and even Matt Rule potentially reach out here in the next coming weeks. As Moore kind of turns his page and pushes a hard reset on his recruitment. Iowa State's in there too, as we mentioned them before. Iowa State pretty much had a presence in this recruitment for a good bit. There's some academic hurdles here, and there's a chance I think that kind of benefits Iowa State over Nebraska right now, but also I think the proximity to home, the role and kind of his fit. He's 6'1", 288. There's a role at Nebraska for him as a nose tackle or an interior defensive tackle in Nebraska's 3-3-5 scheme. But at that size, there's a chance Iowa State, they have a couple guys like that. They could have a better plan for him. Right now, I think it's an Iowa State and Nebraska race. Nebraska's going to get him on campus for the UCLA game next month. They could get him on campus even sooner. Obviously that Rutgers game is coming up. He could sneak into town potentially. Nebraska has a bye week later this season. Nebraska could potentially try and bring in some visitors there, but more than likely they're just going to hit the road during that week. And as for Nebraska and as for Moore specifically, on top of those two programs, he's going to make it out to Iowa State at some point. Doesn't have a date set for that. Clemson has been in touch. He's been in touch there. And I don't think he ends up out there just because the proximity to home. I think he's looking for something within driving distance. Two schools he's hoping would re-engage, and schools he wants offers from. Local Mizzou, in-state Mizzou. He's got some friends, including former teammate Williams and Minari, the number one defensive lineman in the 2023 cycle, is at Mizzou, and he also is intrigued by Kansas and Kansas State, two schools closer to home as well. But as of right now, I think it's Nebraska and Iowa State. I like Nebraska here if he's got the green light to commit. Obviously, Nebraska's got three defensive line commits. They are monitoring Malcolm Simpson with Texas, flirting with Simpson and Simpson, engaging back. He made a visit out to Texas last weekend, and he's planning to be back at Texas for the Georgia game later in October. So Nebraska's just got to keeping an eye on that situation, and I think that's also going to affect more. I think regardless, Nebraska would be looking for an interior defensive lineman if the right one pops up. Moore could be that guy. But I'm curious to see just how much Nebraska engages and what Nebraska kind of looks to do there with him here in the next couple of weeks. While we were there, we obviously saw Isaiah Mozee as well. He had two touchdowns. He was sensational in the first half, exited early in the second half with a sprained ankle. It's a low ankle sprain. He said he's going to, kind of just the game was in hand for at least Summit North by the time he left. So, he was more so playing it safe. Nothing to really be worried about injury wise there. As for Mosey, just as a talent, I mean, we'll just start off here. He's 100% locked in with Nebraska. Obviously, his dad's on staff. But he made sure to clarify, I think a lot has been made of like, oh, Nebraska got him because his dad's on staff. This was as much the impact of Matt Rule and Garrett McGuire and Dylan Raiola as it was, having his dad on the staff. Even before his dad moved from UCF to Nebraska. Nebraska was trending to flip Mosey. Getting his dad was kind of just the cherry on top a little bit. But more than anything, I think, we're talking to him, and I'll have quotes on that here at Inside Nebraska. You can read that story this week over at Inside Nebraska. But his quotes on Dylan, the relationship he has there, the relationships he has across Nebraska. He's mentioned Nebraska is very much a family atmosphere, and obviously it got that way even more with his dad on staff. I see Mosey as a guy that's going to be able to come in on campus and contribute immediately. He plays all over his own offense. He can play some running back, play some slot receiver, play some outside receiver, even lines up a wildcat quarterback sometimes, takes some direct snaps and rolls out. He's a fascinating player. He can kind of fit all over the field. His best traits are what he does with the ball in his hands. He's so elusive after the catch, has excellent body control and balance through contact, just runs like a running back. He kind of he's got running back vision. He takes good angles. He's got fluid hips. He just does it really good. He's very smooth. And you kind of see that in how he carries the ball. I was impressed in kind of the technique refinement he's done to his route running and just what he's done there. He really has a good understanding of timing and change of direction and just leverage and how to get depth. He was pretty consistently open. Quarterback often couldn't get to him in time with the pressure on him, but and just the 3-4 reads. But he's very much the focal point of the offense. Had two touchdowns, as I mentioned, and was just exceptional. You watch him run routes, even routes he's not even getting the ball, but the way he just manipulates defensive backs with his acceleration, his ability to excel and decel, and just his body control too, in and out of breaks. Makes him a tough cover. If you want to think about like a current player or like a type of role he played in Nebraska, Nebraska kind of talked about using him kind of like they do Ja'Cory Barney right now, lining him up all over the offense, manufacturing some touches with him on sweeps or reverses and screens. I think Mosey's the type of guy. He's 6'2", bigger and taller than Barney is. Bigger than Jalen Lloyd, and I think bigger than I gave him credit for. You see he's got a thick lower base, like again, like a running back's lower base, very strong core, and a frame that's going to continue to fill out. I think he's going to be a contributor for Nebraska pretty early on in his career. And I think he's going to be a guy that finds his way on the field pretty early on. And it's going to be hard for him to leave the field, just in my opinion. We mentioned going into this weekend, Nebraska's got Rutgers coming to town on October 5th. There's a 3 o'clock game, which gives Nebraska an opportunity to get some visitors in town. We're expecting a good amount of local visitors. I'm expecting a couple of commits: Connor Booth, Christian Jones, Tyson Terry, etc. could be back in town. Expecting them back in town. Honestly, they've been frequenting campus pretty much since committing to Nebraska with Nebraska's kind of home stretch they've had early this year. Caden Verghese and Pierce Newberry likely make it back to town as well. I think if you're looking for notable visitors this week, and you have to look in the 2026 class just because that's where things are at right now. Nebraska's all but closed the book in 2025. Handful of guys still out there. This is a tough weekend to make visits work for some guys. But in 2026, they're getting Keenan Harris, four-star linebacker out of St. Louis University High. That's a top target for Nebraska. Director of Player Personnel Keith Williams has already gone to go see him this year. When Nebraska played Northern Iowa, Williams made a trip out to St. Louis to go see Harris take on St. Louis DeSmet, where Titan Davis, another 2026 four-star defensive tackle or defensive line target, plays. Went to go see both those guys, two top Nebraska targets. Just wanted to make it known to them that they're the top priorities for Nebraska. Harris definitely feels the love. He was at Nebraska over the summer, that end of July weekend, and that was a big visit for him. He mentioned at the time it's Nebraska, Missouri, Oklahoma kind of at the top because those three schools have been on him for so long and have been recruiting him for so long that it's those at the top. Nebraska has a good plan for him. He sees himself fitting into the defense, playing at all three linebacker spots. Has a really good relationship with Rob Dvorak, along with a couple other staffers, including the aforementioned Keith Williams. I like Nebraska there early on, but that's going to be a battle. Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, a couple of those big time schools, a couple of SEC schools are starting to kind of heat up with him as well. But I think Nebraska's presence, and he's mentioned this as well. For him, it's the persistence of schools like Nebraska and Missouri that have been there from the jump that really sticks out to him, and I think that's going to keep both those programs in the recruitment until the end. You can't count out obviously Missouri with some of the in-state NIL stuff they have it to their advantage. I would keep an eye on them. I think they're a real serious contender. Oklahoma as well. But I really like where Nebraska stands with him. We'll see what this weekend does for him. Another visitor this weekend, Deviune Bonwell-Whitty, three-star wide receiver out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. He's a top target for Nebraska. He's missed this junior season, unfortunately, with a broken knee. He broke his knee pretty early in the year, so he's going to miss the rest of the year. But it's allowing him to make some visits and kind of take his recruitment into his own hands and kind of see what's out there for him. A school I'd keep an eye on outside of Nebraska there is going to be Kansas State and Minnesota. He's been in Minnesota a good bit, has some good relationships up there, kind of likes what they do with their receivers. He sees himself fitting in that room. But Nebraska's done a good job as well, kind of getting him on campus, building relationships with him. He's got a good relationship with Garrett McGuire and a couple other guys on staff. Kind of sees a vision in Nebraska. Obviously, I think the opportunity to potentially play with Dylan Raiola is intriguing for a lot of guys, and he's one of those guys too. Likes the offense Nebraska plays in, can kind of see himself fitting in as a receiver that can play at all three levels. Impressive young talent, and it really is a shame he's missing his junior year because he's at a new school. Would have liked to see what he does there, but I really like the sophomore tape. I like what I saw from him this offseason, and just sucks, these injuries are real tough for guys when it's kind of a big year for them to potentially boost their recruitment or really put some numbers on the table. So he's going to have to sit out this year, unfortunately, and come back his senior year. But those are the two main headliners. We're monitoring a couple other names. One to keep an eye on, Temple defensive end Jamarian Carlton. Mentioned in the past, this was a weekend he was hoping to get up to Nebraska. As we currently stand, though, there's been no confirmation on whether he's going to be able to make it in or not. So that's a name we're monitoring. He had that circled at the beginning of the year, but the way the season goes, the way just the visits go and certain things trend. I at this point it's just not a given he's going to make it into town. Obviously, that list will continue to change. Stay tuned over to Inside Nebraska for the ever-changing visit list and kind of a list of who all makes it into town. Wanted to close out this video with just kind of focusing on the 27 QB class. Nebraska's got an opportunity there now to get ahead there with Dayton Raiola committed in 2026, TJ Lateef secure in 2025. Nebraska can kind of turn the page 2 cycles ahead and start getting ahead on their QB search there, as dominoes have already fallen in 2026 and dominoes are starting to fall in 2027. Nebraska has 5 offers out currently. Weston Nielsen in Bastrop, Texas. He's one of the top quarterbacks in the country. Trent Seaborn at Thompson out in Alabama. They're a powerhouse program that's produced some of the top talent across college football. A lot of those guys stay in the SEC. Seaborn's among them, a guy that's got offers all over the country, but likely ends up sticking, in the SEC. But Nebraska's got an offer out there. And we'll see if the play of Dylan Raiola, the recruiting efforts of Glenn Thomas and Marcus Satterfield can make an impact there. Jamison Purcell out of Maine South in Illinois. That's another name to keep an eye on. He was in town over the summer, camped in front of Nebraska staff, landed an offer, has kept engaging with the staff since. And that's a guy I would keep an eye on. He's a top Midwest quarterback, a guy very much in Nebraska's radius, and a guy that I think Nebraska would like to have. Daniel Milkey out of Ontario Christian in California is another quarterback with a Nebraska offer. There's not been much there. Nebraska was an early offer, but so were Georgia and Michigan. He's a guy that kind of, is a California quarterback, kind of managing his recruitment like a pro, managing his whole process like a pro. And so has yet to visit Nebraska. We'll see if that changes here in the near future, if not this season, in the spring, as his recruitment starts to heat up a little bit and he starts to whittle things down. But Nebraska was an early contender there. We'll see what happens there. Another California quarterback worth mentioning, of course, is Furian Ferreira out of Mater Dei, the powerhouse program out in California that's produced the likes of Brandon Baker last year, 5-star offensive tackle, went to Texas. Amon-Ra St. Brown, JT Daniels played there. It's produced quarterback after quarterback, elite prospect after elite prospect. They've got guys all over college football. Playing guys in the league, they're a powerhouse program, one of the top in the country, if not the top program in the country. Furian's actually the backup quarterback there, sitting behind an older quarterback. As of 2027, he's just a sophomore, kind of biding his time. Had a good spring, had a good offseason on the 7-on-7 circuit. Really liked kind of the flashes he's shown, and he's visited Nebraska a couple times already. Visited back in the season, visited for the spring game, and I believe he made it back in over the summer. Might be wrong there. I'm going off the top of my head, but he's been in Nebraska a couple of times already. Nebraska likes him a lot. He fits what they want at quarterback. Obviously, they want more film on him too. He's just kind of sitting as a backup quarterback right now. They want to see more film on him, but they like the early twos. It's a guy that's kind of already has some offers as well. Just with the pedigree, throwing in front of quarterback coaches, he's really impressed in the camp circuit. And he's a guy Nebraska would like to have down the line. Those are the 5 early names Nebraska's already offered. You could see more offers going out. A name I would keep a close eye on as we kind of look ahead to 2027. Braylon Warren out at Omaha West Side, son of Steve Warren, who played at Nebraska, is founder of Warren Academy here that's produced a ton of talent and helped develop a ton of local talent that's gone on to play college football at Nebraska and just across college football. A guy that a lot of people in Omaha in the state trust in development and trust to develop guide their own players through the recruiting process and through the general process. As for Braylon, he's seasoned his first year starting at Westside. Go watch his highlight tape. He's had a good start to the year, kind of flashed some throws. We saw him a bunch this offseason. We saw him in 7-on-7 work. We saw him in team practices. We saw him in team 7-on-7. So we've gotten eyes on him a bunch. We like what we've seen from him. As for this episode, that'll probably do it for us here at Inside Nebraska. I just want to hit on a couple quick things. As we said, we'll have more next week coming out of the visit weekend, and kind of an opportunity to get a little more momentum for Nebraska on the recruiting trail with a big win, with a potential big win over Rutgers. But that'll do it for us here at Inside Nebraska. Stay tuned at our site, InsideNebraska.com. Be sure to like and subscribe to this video. Stay tuned for all our video content here at the Inside Nebraska YouTube channel. But like we said, that'll do it for us, and we'll see you all next week.